Hello. So I have to excuse my husky voice. Not only am I post-COVID, but I've spent the entire morning with about 100 Year 9 students doing school outreach. And Year 9s are so much more hard work than MSc students. So I'm going to try and make it clear as I can. So I'm going to talk about my work over the last 5 years on creating marketing simulations. And this is using a virtual learning environment, predominantly Canvas. So my sort of first experience of doing this simulation was for a module which required us to sort of simulate the work of a real marketing department and conditions of uncertainty, which was kind of quite crucial. By using a computer simulation that had been chosen for me and working in teams and making marketing decisions such as designing quite basic new products, setting prices and determining distribution channels. So it was very much around metrics and creating an open and evolving environment where the marketing decisions actually impacted on other teams. So this sounded all well and good, but actually in practice it just went horribly wrong. And we spent the whole semester with technical failures, everything freezing. And also, it was just too easy. And this was MSc marketing students, and they absolutely hated it. And, they were just moaning a lot. And I could completely understand why. So the second year, I changed to a different simulation and again had the same technical problems. It was constantly crashing and freezing. And because it was a timed game, students were losing a turn and then their metrics were affected and they were more likely to lose the game against the other students. And some of the students just could not cope with this at all. And one of my students actually picked up his laptop and tried to throw it across the room because he was so angry with the whole thing. And I was spending that time actually on the helpline in the middle of the class. So as a simulation, the experience was just really poor. And I'd had enough, but I was stuck with a module that I wasn't allowed to change. So I decided to do my own thing. So what happened was that I wrote my own simulation basically, and I created it sort of based on my own experience of working in marketing practice. I had no budget, so I had to use what I had available to me. So I used Canvas as the platform from which this simulation would run. And I created a storyline around it, and all of the things that the students were asked to do were absolutely precise, the kind of work that you would expect to do as a marketer, including really pointless managerial tasks that your boss sets you that there is absolutely no point to. So there was kind of everything involved. We even had employment contracts for the team so they could sack people if they wanted to. Now, in this sense, there was no prize, there were no higher marks for your performance on the simulation, but there was this sense of gamification. It was like playing a timed game because we played in rounds, and they felt this sense of achievement if they responded faster to the tasks than other teams. And I set this around the supermarket sector. So each team represented a real supermarket and they were working with real life market data. And we also responded to news as it happened in real time as well. So if one week something terrible had happened to Tesco, we would run with that and work with it. We would play 4 rounds, and through each round they would get formative feedback. So this would be from the staff involved in these fictional supermarkets. So rather than feeling that the formative feedback was coming from Cheryl, their tutor, it was actually coming from someone within the supermarket environment that we were simulating. So, in this sense, they didn't have to kind of game how to play. Whereas with the computer simulations, they were trying to cheat the system. They were actually learning how to do marketing in real life. The one thing I was quite keen on was this idea of kind of a transformational experience. So Kadar talks about sort of internalizing these business concepts and thinking about knowledge and experience that's relevant to your career and thinking about concrete hands-on skills. So I wanted it to be quite revelatory as well. So at the end of each round, they were sort of mapping. At the end of each round, they would actually see what they'd learned by looking at the learning objectives afterwards. So rather than giving them the learning objectives at the front, were doing at the end. So then they could see actually how much they'd learned and how much they'd developed. Just to give you an example of how I was using the VLE, I was using it as a kind of simulated email system. So through announcements, everything would come through to them. So it might be a blog, it might be a newspaper publication, it might be an email from a member of staff in the department. All of these different things would happen. So they were constantly having to refresh their screens, and it was very much live in real time, 2 hours of absolute chaos. Just to sort of give you an example of the kind of things that we were doing, one of the activities was the hot dog challenge. So this was where dog meat was found in hot dogs, and all of the supermarkets had to respond to this kind of product quality crisis. So there were all sorts of things going on the VLE, but also around them as well. So this first version here was very much blended, and there were things happening in real life as well as on the screen. So they really had to kind of keep their eye on the ball and to understand what was going on. And there was a cast of all of these characters in the supermarket. So all of the characters worked with them. So they would receive emails from Bob, their manager, and Miranda, who was the kind of villain of the piece, who was always taking credit for everybody's work. And so they would have all of these different interactions with different functional departments as well. I've got a few pictures to show you. So you can see here, this is an active learning room. So all of the students were sitting around computer screens, and they were also able to use their mobile phones as well. And you can see here that they were doing practical experiments as well. So they were actually designing packaging here as an alternative to plastic. And in this one, you can see here some of the live actors that I roped into coming in. Now, there was no equity membership here. These are actually members of the professional staff. I brought along a prop. This is the actual dog poo used in the simulation, and this was the facilities manager coming in and sort of saying that there were a protest group had arrived in reception, all of these angry dog owners, and there was a dog poo in his shiny marble floor. And what were the team going to do about it? So the team had to respond in real time to explain. And in the top right hand corner, you can see that in the last round, Bob actually turned up, their marketing manager, for his leaving do, before he turned into a consultant slash yoga expert and went to work in Thailand. And at the bottom, you can see when we decided to run Good Morning Britain, and that's actually me acting in the bottom right hand corner on their video screens. So there were so many exciting things going on. So all brilliant, and you can see here from the student feedback, it was really, really positive. And they liked the practical examples, they liked the chance to put theory into practice. And then of course what happened, then the pandemic came along and everything went slightly horribly wrong. So expect the unexpected. Students were all completely at home, everything was fully distance learning. So the idea of having these physical actors and these big showpieces and, you know, all these exciting things, I had to think about everything completely differently. And I also had to rely on technology working for my students, who by this point were spread all around the world again. So it was much harder to check on learning with those virtual groups, because if you see those lovely tables that, you know, I was able to move around, I was actually acting as well, I was in part, but I couldn't do that anymore. So it's actually much more difficult to kind of track what's going on behind the scenes. But also the other thing I wanted to do was to keep that excitement going, because the students were just buzzing when we were able to do the blended approach. So I did my very best to keep that excitement up and the energy. So the difference,
about a minute and a half left, Cheryl.
Sure, yeah, no, that's fine. So the difference really was that I was relying on the teams to manage themselves. Everything ran through Canvas. But actually the students did take more ownership of the experience and displayed more initiative. So they all took it off channel. They were creating their own communication groups on WhatsApp and things like that. And they also displayed a lot more initiative. So, for example, one of the things that happened was that they were asked to explore whether to buy a French supermarket, which had closed down during the pandemic. And the person that they were working with would only speak French to them. So that was quite funny because they tried to speak in English, but I actually had my au pair with me at the time, who was the French person, and she was typing the responses. And as soon as they realised that she wouldn't respond to them in English, suddenly we had all of these great big conversations coming back in French, where they were using their friends and they were using Google Translate to make things clear. And the feedback was actually just as good. They really loved the diversion, they loved the fun of it, and they loved working with each other as teams behind the scenes. So that effective teamwork could still take place. They found their own ways to collaborate. That sense of jeopardy remained because they still didn't know what was going to happen as everything buzzed up and happened. I guess the only thing from my perspective was that the actors were pre-recorded rather than live. So next steps, challenges. My simulation now needs a new home. We had a curriculum change. I'm still really concerned about how to measure the effectiveness and the satisfaction. So if anyone's got any ideas, I'd love to hear them. And I'd love to reflect new ways of working as well. So, now we're using Teams and, working from home and things like that. So I hope that I could help to students to understand that more and maybe tell some new stories. That's me done. A whistle-stop tour.
Fantastic, thank you. It was a whistle-stop tour, but it was a brilliant tour. And wow, your students, they are lucky to have you, Cheryl. They really are, because I think your enthusiasm there just shines through. I don't know how many people would be willing to get stuck into kind of live acting roles during a class. I think that's first class. So yeah, well done.
I wanted to write a novel when I was younger, so all of my writing came out in this.
Oh, it's brilliant. I love it. Thank you. Anna from the chat has asked a question. I'll just ask this, Anna. I hope you don't mind. She asked, what was the source you cited for the model transformational experience?
It was CADOT 2016. I can send the reference.
Brilliant. Thank you. And there was one other question that I was going to ask, but I think you've kind of suggested it already. But when you were saying what's next, do you have any idea as to kind of?
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm thinking about now is using this for school outreach, because we're trying to sort of give students an understanding of, what goes on in business and, what they can expect. So I'm looking at doing, one-off episodes now. And creating, I'm doing one around the Me Too. So there's a leader that's kind of gone off on his own and doing whatever he likes. And, what do you do when he's the one that's made all the money and, he's the big entrepreneur. So I think it's different episodes, really. And I'm thinking about doing a return to blended because, like I said to Jamie, I'm worried about this online fatigue. And, I think the thing that was so exciting about this was the big set pieces that we were able to do by bringing in physical actors. And the other thing that I'm thinking about is embedding it as a training for students going on placements. So you do some kind of simulation before you go out on placement, which I think could be quite interesting.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah. Okay. Well, unfortunately, we've run to time, but again, we could just ask questions all day. Thank you again, Cheryl. That was another great talk. And yeah, I think there may be one or two questions in the chat. So if you could have a look, that would be brilliant. Thank you.